This is Jackie Cooper with Crypto Mom 2 and Love Travel Scotland and JCooperTravels, all my wonderful talk shows. I welcome everyone back to this episode and also ask that you like and subscribe because there are some wonderful conversations happening and you want to always be able to stay in the loop as to the conversations that I'm dropping. So today I have a woman on who is an expert in the financial area to help guide women in their financial empowerment, to think about where are we going and where have we been and what do we need to know? Because again, in this age, there are many different products that we can select and choose for our financial well-being, but we're not always taught how to do that. So we're going to have a conversation as to, for every age, as to what we need to be thinking about as women, as moms, you know, as mentors with those that are around us, because again, our life is driven by many things. It's driven by spirit, but it's also driven by money. And what you can do in our life is sometimes dependent upon the funds that we have. So, with that being said, before I hop over to my special guest, for those that might not know my background, I'll do a short share. I'm an attorney, but I'm not doing traditional law. I have decided to kind of be a creative entrepreneur, so I'm involved with many hats and many spaces. I'm an author. I've written the Bitcoin Cinderella and a variety of other books that are on Amazon, and you're welcome to check them out. But I'm also an educator. I'm currently a special educator in the elementary school side. So I'm very much aware of what we're sharing with our children from the financial side, from the money side, you know, from the preparation side. And we're doing a great job, but there's many other things that we need to be doing. So I'm always trying to find guests that can add to the conversation so that way we know about new developments, because there's always an evolution within our financial community. I know when I was younger, I never thought about retirement. I never thought about IRAs, and I certainly didn't know what a Roth IRA was. So, you know, I also didn't even know or think about blockchain when I was younger. And, you know, again, as the internet has evolved, so has the Web3 and now blockchain. And so, you know, from that perspective, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. I do have to mention that the show is not financial advice. It's not investment advice. It's not legal advice. This is educational only. And we're going to be hopping all around on a lot of different topics. But before we do, I want to welcome Susan Ritter, who is the creator and the founder of Wealthy Wise Woman. I'm very excited to have you here because I think those three words, you know, are really truthful. You know, how can we be wealthy? How can we be wise as women? And so welcome. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Jacqueline. Yes, I agree. This is great opportunity to just speak with you and speak with your community. And that really is what the meaning of the title of my business is, because I think women are wise. We don't necessarily all trust ourselves, and it takes some education along the way, usually, for us to find our voice and find our power. And so the work that I do is really to empower women around money, especially these days, because we really have control of a lot of money today, a lot more than we ever did in the past. And so it's important to know how to utilize it, how to understand it and its purpose. People don't really understand what money is, and therefore they don't really know how to use it. And we'll often see it just flows through our hands, and we're not using it in a way that's going to benefit ourselves or really benefit anyone else. And so once we start to understand money as a tool, then we can start knowing how to use it and really make the changes in the world that we want to make. And that's important to me because as a mom, I have a son that is going into this future that is going to be completely different from anything we knew in the 20th century. And we're all kind of figuring it out as we go along. So if we understand the tools, it makes a difference in how we prepare ourselves and our children for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're gonna hop over to your platform in a second, but
Mhm.
I love stories, and I think it's important for everyone who's listening. If you're on the audio side, hop over to the YouTube side. But for both of you, you know, whether you're on the audio or on the YouTube side, I'll embed all of the links so that way you'll be able to reach out to Susan or have access to any of the other things that you're hearing about. How did you get started in this? What's your own personal journey? And I know that like for me, it has not been straight and narrow. So I know you've taken
Right.
many twists and turns too.
That's right. That's true. Uh, when I started back in, I guess my adult years started really in the 80s. Computing was just really getting started where we could engage in it. Up till that point, it was big companies and mainframes. And I had taken education in that at university and actually quite hated it. And finally dropped out of university, went to work. When I went back to school, I ended up going into a technology degree specifically because what technology gave us as women was access to the sciences in a time when it was not considered something that women could do or should do. And I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. I didn't necessarily want to be a teacher. My mother was a teacher. I didn't want to be a secretary. I wanted to do something more interesting. And the introduction of PCs and small computers, that was a ticket to an engineering type background that I was fascinated with, but that my father said was not for girls. So it was a way in to that business. And because it was the beginning, and that's relevant because we're in new beginnings again today. And it's important for young women to look at what their alternatives are, because when new things show up, there's nobody to say that this is not for you. And it's true, boys as well, but it's open to everybody, and it's only how far you want to take it yourself. And so with that degree, I ended up in putting technology into a warehousing environment first. That led me to an opportunity to get into nuclear plants in the States. I actually grew up in Canada, and through a number of twists and turns, I ended up in South Carolina at a nuclear plant doing implementations of IT projects down there. That led to a really great career for 20 years in nuclear plants, doing cybersecurity and new nuclear implementation, and actually a lot of engineering in the end.
That was pretty cutting edge when you think about it.
Yeah, it was. I have been, the timing for my life has allowed me to be on the cutting edge of every new technology.
Wow.
And it's been, and if you are someone that is interested in technology, that is really exciting. It's how I ended up in crypto. It's how I've ended up in the metaverse today. When you sort of embrace that and recognize that there's opportunities in new things,
Right.
then once you start, you can't really stop. You just keep doing it. And so that's really what is so exciting about today. So I did the nuclear for my career, but when I was quite late in age, at 47, I had my child, my one and only son. I didn't know that I was going to have children. It was sort of a toss-up. I always thought I would someday, and then all of a sudden it was almost like I couldn't. So I went, okay, it's now or never. And I had my son, and it changes how, especially once you've already had a career for a number of decades, you change how you look at family when you start a family later in life. I had all the resources. I could have retired at that point, but there were things I wanted to bring to my son. And one of those things was living an international lifestyle. He was born in 2005. And if you remember, that was when we really got into globalization. Everybody was going overseas. And I thought, for a young person in this millennium, you have to be global. And so I thought, when he was born, I thought about how would I do that? And I set myself a goal of saying, I am going to be completely self-sufficient, financially free by the time I'm 59 and a half. That's when I have access to my investments. And then I retire and we go overseas. And the goal was to live on every continent before he was grown and gone, so that we had communities, like actually live on every continent, so that we had communities everywhere in the world, so that no matter what happens in this disruptive time, we could always have somewhere to go where there were people that we knew and a community that we could join. And so that was the goal. And it was 2005. And so I put the plan together and started going. Now, in those days, my idea of investing is what we had been taught. It
Right.
wasn't investing, it was saving. Put your money into stuff, the government and the company will take care of it for you. But when you retire, it'll all be there and everything will be wonderful. And you didn't really have to know or do anything. You just kept giving them money and they took care of it. And then 2008 happened. And this plan that I was now 3 years into my 10-year plan and feeling like I'm really making progress, all of a sudden, I wasn't making progress. I was going backwards.
Yeah.
And that was the time that I phoned the broker and said, what's going on? Like, y'all tell us.
I'm going to interrupt for a quick second.
Yeah.
For those
Yeah.
that might not remember, why don't you share with them what happened into that time frame? Because again, some of us have lived it, but some of us have not.
Right. So in 2008, we had the financial crisis, and the financial crisis was the result of really the financial community getting ahead of themselves. They had started investing in things that were not safe based on the idea that real estate will never go down. And we have this short memory when it comes to investing. We only remember since the last crisis, because we have new generations that come in and things are going well and it's growing and everything's doing great. And so we think, oh, we'll never turn. And this time, like every time we go through the cycle, there's a different catalyst that takes us out. This round that led us to 2008 was a real estate based catalyst that took us out. And because real estate is something that we all invest in, especially in those days, everybody was either had a house or was striving to get a house because we believed it was the safest investment that you can have. We had been told that for 70 years. This is the safest investment and we all want to own a house. That is the goal. And so people had, and many people have their whole life savings wrapped up in a house. And so when the financial community started leveraging our investment in our properties and leveraging it in a way to put it at risk, when that risk got bigger than it could support, it collapsed on itself. And when it collapsed, it took pretty much everybody out with it. And like all crashes, and that one was a crash, like all crashes, people start losing their jobs. Then things get harder and harder. You lose your house and things just snowball from there. And so I was fortunate. Working in utilities, people always need power. Businesses always need power. My job was never at risk, but people around me were. And so so I was lucky. I was fortunate. I didn't have a true reset like so many people had, but I did have a mind reset, because until that point in time, I believed what I'd been told. Put your money into their programs and it'll all be there when I'm ready for it. And all of a sudden, I realized that that's not exactly how it works. And when I talked to them, there was this sense of, well, yeah, like that's just how it works. And that lack of empathy for the people who had been handing them the money, that made me angry. That's when I got angry. I will give people the benefit of a doubt until they mess it up. And then I kind of take it back in, I roll it all back in, and I do what I have to do to learn how to do it myself. And I never give them another chance. They only get one chance at it. I did that to my accountants, and now I do all my own accounting. I did that to a lawyer, and I now do all of that. And so it's hard. You got to learn, and I still use those people as advisors, but I never give them the work anymore. I learn what I need, then I go and I have the conversation, and I let them sort of help me to understand where I might be having blind spots. And
So
that,
I think I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Hopefully you won't lose your thought there. I think
Nope.
that that's a really great lesson for all of us to learn, though. I mean, my background's law, but I still use other attorneys as advisors. I understand what you're saying about accountants. I think that it is important to educate ourselves, even if we're using someone else as an advisor, though, because we have to be able to critically ask the question. So if we intuitively feel that something's not right, even if we don't know the reason why, we can ask the question to get the answer. And I think in the world of finance too, I've been guilty with this, when I started as a teacher, they said, okay, mutual funds, they said this, I said, okay, fine, how much? And you're not educating yourself as to, well, what is it actually the pool being put into? And then when you see that the return is not what you think, you're thinking, okay, but I can't blame them. I didn't ask the question. Yes, you can blame someone else, but you really have to take responsibility for yourself. So, I mean, I think that's a really important lesson for anyone listening. You might not know it all. And in law school, they teach you cannot know it all. You will have access to a library, and that library will provide the resources, but there's no way you can. You have to build it as a team. So keep going, because this is important. These are important life lessons.
Yeah. And that's right. And that's exactly right. You can't know it. And especially today, things are changing so fast that nobody knows it. It is in that communication and sort of being open to things that are happening, and forever recognizing that we're only always learning, that you can even keep up with what's going on. And so it is really important to not hide yourself away and just think you're going to do what you always did. That doesn't work. But it is important to take ownership of those results. It was very easy for me to say it was my broker's fault. He did that. That didn't bring me the money back. No. And that doesn't protect me from the next time we go through this cycle. Now, at that point, I didn't know this was a cycle. I just thought that we're going along and we're doing what we're told to do. And then all of a sudden somebody screwed up and it was all their fault. And now what do we do? What I ended up doing is I then took ownership and I started learning and I started reading, because this was 2008. Nobody, if you wanted to know about how to invest, you had to go take a course from a university or a school that taught financial advisors how to do financial advising. I had no interest in that, nor time for that, because I had a full-time job. I was running massive projects that were industry level projects. They were like 12 to 16-hour days. So I didn't have time to go to school on this. But it was important to me because I did not want to give up my goals. And so I just started reading. And the first aha that I got out of reading was that the stock market is not the only place to invest. In fact, the stock market is probably one of the riskiest places to invest, depending on how you're doing it. And that was surprising to me. All we ever talk about, all the press talks about, is the stock market and what companies are doing. But there are many ways to invest your money that are much safer. And there's other ways to invest today that are more risky, but you can change your life with a good investment at the right time, handled in the right way. And not all of those opportunities have been available to everybody in the past, but they are today. And the way I found them was by not going and reading what was written by people who are feeding sort of us middle class, ordinary people. I went and read the books that the wealthy write for themselves and each other, because I wanted to know, how does a Rockefeller actually stay rich no matter what happens in the economy?
Right.
What happens to those? Why is the Gates family getting wealthier with every generation, no matter what's going on? When you start understanding the way they think and the way they invest, they are not speculators in the sense of gambling. They are speculators in the fact that they are cutting edge, which I already was embracing, but they do it in a way that is not a gamble. You need to know what you're doing. You need to understand the industry that you are speculating within. And so there are many, many great, things that these wealthy people and investors have said, that when you really understand what they mean, it can change everything about how you invest. And you become, and two things happen. You not only end up with a safer portfolio, but you also have a portfolio that is growing much faster than what you get just by putting it into a bunch of ETFs and mutual funds.
And
At
also
the same time.
it's also diversified, which
Yeah, that's why.
yeah, exactly. So that means that you're leveraging things.
Right.
So I'm going to show the website, your platform, so that way you can share a little bit more about who you're helping and how you do this. And for everyone who's on the audio side or even on the visual side, don't worry, I'm going to embed the link below so that way you can kind of check it out yourself. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about what Freedom and Legacy Architect means, and who you're trying to help and how you're trying to help them.
Okay. So when we invest, we really need to start from what our values are. And for me, my top 3 values really are freedom and family and personal responsibility, because I believe that the 3 of those support each other, and you need both, or you need all of them to make the other 2 work. And when I did retire, we started traveling. We moved to Malaysia. It was wonderful. We were living there when COVID hit. And so we were there, and people were calling me, women that I knew were calling me, asking me about things, because the stock market had crashed and they were freaking out. And what was I doing to protect? And I realized that there was a gap for women. Women don't know what to do when things go badly with their investments. And so I wanted to focus on women, because they come to investing in a different way than men do. Their relationship to money is different than what it is for men. And women tend to avoid talking about money. They don't like to even ask for money when they're providing a service. That is a historical model that there's all kinds of cultural reasons that we come to that. And so I needed to build my business and my message in a way that it allowed women to say, it's okay for me to be rich. It is okay for me to have money. It is okay for me to accept wealth and not have to apologize for it, and not try to pretend that it doesn't exist. Too many women spend their money as fast as it comes in, because they don't want to justify having it.
Well,
and so
it sort of ties into the quote that's on here right now for people that are on the visual side. Gloria Steinem said, "Rich people plan for 4 generations. Poor people plan for Saturday night." Now, I definitely understand living paycheck to paycheck. Totally get it. Been there, done that. But I do agree with the idea that you have to forward think, how are you planning for this next generation? and I'm just going to put a little tag in here. And this is again, my law side and also as the mom side for me. If you do not have a will, you need to get a will. If you do not know where to go for a will, reach out to me. I have affordable resources because every person needs to have a will, whether or not you have any investment in digital assets or traditional assets. You need a will so that way your family knows how and where those assets are, because that's how you're planning for the next generation. If you just leave it without any guidance, then as you've mentioned, Susan, before, the government will step in and say, okay, this is how you need to do it. So you need to, like with everything else, stake your claim as to how you want your wealth, however large it is, again, your assets that you've built, whether it's real estate, whether it's digital, you need to say where and how you want it to be designated and who to go to. So anyway, keep going, because I think that these are very important things that we sometimes, like you said, don't want to talk about and don't want to face, but they're part of life and part of the life cycle.
Right. And that's a great segue into the other half of what I talk about, which is legacy. I really became engaged in this when I became a mother. And it became important to me that whatever, I'm a single mother as well. So whatever happens to me, it has to be set up in a way that my son is taken care of, whether something happens to me tomorrow or it happens to me in 20 or 30 years. I have to be thinking about how do we take the assets that I've acquired over my lifetime and make sure that they go into his hands instead of into the government's hands. And a will is one of those ways. There's other tools, a trust. There's a number of ways.
Yep.
This was another one of those things that I learned through that research, because the Rockefellers figured that out. They realized that your legacy is not the assets that you pass to your children. Your legacy is what you've taught your children about what to do with those assets when they take control of them.
Very true.
Because there is a well-known phrase that is from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. And it is this idea that somebody has built up an empire of wealth, like the Rockefellers, like the Fords, the Ford Company, the Vanderbilts. There's a number of them in America. There's a number of them in the UK. There's a number of them around the world. And these entrepreneurs who built these massive corporations, some of them understood that it's not enough to just build it and then just leave it for people to figure out when they're dead, but to actually plan how to move that forward so that the legacy, which is not the money, the legacy is what you built, that dies with you if you have not transferred that knowledge, that background, that understanding to that next generation.
Yeah, I mean,
so
money is just a tool. It's a tool for what you want to do to make a difference in the world. And that difference can be both your family, but it also can be charity. It can be your global community. So, and for those that are on the visual, there's a lot of little sayings that are scrolling by here, which I think is very true. To how to be a financial architect. I think that when you are thinking about what an architect does, an architect builds a home, but you're building your life. You're building a lot of other things, and you have to have a foundation. So, so how else are you helping the women that you support, and how do people reach out to you, and how do you help them? Do you have classes, or how does that work?
So I can work in two ways, really. I either can work with women who want to work one-on-one, and the women who tend into that approach usually have a large portfolio of, well, they have a lot of money, not necessarily invested, or it's invested but not with any thought. They've done what I had done. It's just sort of in places and they don't really understand what it's doing. And they want to learn enough to get control of it. And so, but they don't want to do that in a group because they don't want people to know what they have. And so I will work with women that are in that circumstance on a one-to-one basis. And it's very important because it's really, the program is tied to your personality, your value systems, your goals, your risk tolerance. We start with an assessment of your person, your actual personality. Because as an investor, we all have blind spots and we all have strengths. And we need to know what those are before we start, because it's going to inform what types of investments. It's going to inform where we can get ourselves in trouble. And being conservative can get you in trouble in one way, whereas being too risk tolerant can get you into different kinds of trouble. So it's about knowing yourself well enough to know what to look out for and how to protect yourself from yourself one way or the other. And so there's that. And then for women who enjoy sort of that social side of it, I also do small group programs. And there's small groups because I still want to have that personal one-to-one part to it, but we don't get into the numbers as much. It's more into the concepts only and discussing it. And so we do groups of 8. The programs are 12 sessions. They can be 12 sessions over a long period of time or short, depending on whether we're doing the group program or the one-on-one. It's very flexible if it's one-on-one. We really tie it to your own schedule and what you want to be working on. And then when you finish the program, I have an ongoing group where it is a weekly call where the women just stay in the group and we talk about what's going on. So during the course, you're learning the concepts of investing. We set up an actual portfolio with an understanding of the different layers that go into a portfolio, from foundational assets to speculative assets, and the different strategies, because strategies define your risk more than the assets themselves. And so we go through all of that. It's very structured and we go through the steps. But once that's all done and your portfolio is set up, or at least planned, then we go into this ongoing. And in the ongoing program, it's really, we're staying up to date. And so everybody in the group, we're all equals. I'm just one of the people in the group. We're always looking at what's out there, what's going on. Today is so exciting because AI is having an impact.
Yep.
All of the new technologies, there's investing opportunities in that. Right now, because of the change, because we're going through this cycle, and right now we're on the markets have withdrawn a little bit. There's all that emotional tension that goes with that, which is it helps a lot to be in a group when you're seeing all that emotion. When things are going really well, then there's sort of that greed emotion you've got to manage. And when things are backing off, there's that fear emotion you have to manage. Being in a group really helps with that, because even though you've sort of planned for it and you think you can control it, it's really hard to be in a silo when you don't know what's coming.
No, I agree with you.
The group's very
It's
useful.
really important to have that the conversation so you can brainstorm, because you learn from different viewpoints. And it's like you said, you don't learn in a vacuum. You really have to have the pros and cons laid out through the conversations, and it helps with the thought process of deciding, okay, is this right for me, or do I need to do something different?
Right.
So having that, I think, is really important. For those, again, who are on the visual, you're going to see. For those that are on the audio, I definitely want to read this because it's something that I think is important. There's another quote, from Warren Buffett. It says, "Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago." And I think, both, from just the physicalness of a tree, that's true. But if you think about also the planning perspective of what we also mentioned, that you plan 4 generations ahead. This is, when you plant a tree, it's a seed, it's a seedling, and then it becomes, the great
Right.
tree that, provides the shade. And that's the long term that we all have to think about.
Right.
Um, I we're going to be having many, many conversations. I know that in one part of the portfolio, you look at diversifying using crypto and Bitcoin. I definitely want to because I'm exploring stories of women who have looked at the Bitcoin and
Mhm.
have participated in that journey. I want to ask you, how did you get involved with Bitcoin and what's your story in that space?
Yeah. I love cryptocurrencies. I learned about it in probably the first time I learned about it in 2015, and I kind of went, whoa, this sounds really flaky and scary and whatever. But I watched it for a while. And in 2016, I bought some Bitcoin. Uh, and it was strange because in those days, Bitcoin, you had to buy Bitcoin to buy anything else. And so I bought quite a bit of Bitcoin, but then I ended up converting most of it over into other things, many things that don't even exist today. But I still have Bitcoin, and as time's gone forward, and I've watched it solidify and create a real foundation not only for the cryptocurrency world, but I think it's going to provide a foundation to the monetary world for for all of us. And I love it because it ties into my whole value system around freedom. That whole decentralized um, aspect of it's yours. It provides you freedom, but it requires you to have personal responsibility. And the two of those things really belong together. You cannot have freedom without personal responsibility. And when you have personal responsibility, it creates freedom. And Bitcoin specifically is a foundational concept, the whole blockchain, but how Bitcoin utilizes that blockchain for that purpose is just, as time goes on, is becoming more and more that it is becoming our digital gold. And as we move into, I am a gold fan as well. I believe in gold, but gold is the old world and Bitcoin is the new world, or blockchain digital assets are the new world. I believe that as we move forward, we have to keep the two well integrated because we actually live in the old world. We live in reality. And so the digital will only ever be a representation. And so it has to be kept tightly linked back to our real life. And I see Bitcoin doing that as holding that responsibility. But since then, of course, it's grown. The whole crypto, the Ethereum became the next big thing. So I'm heavily invested in Ethereum as well, because I see Ethereum as the basis of business going forward. And there's going to be lots of competition and there's going to be lots of alternatives, and standardization, fortunately, is starting to grow. And that will make it, that standardization will make it easier to invest because we won't be trying to figure out which way are we going. We saw that consolidation to a standard in the internet, and we've seen it in past. It was a huge element of the cybersecurity processes that we did in nuclear. Standardization is very important. And as we go there, as you're participating in it, and you invest in the things that are supporting the standards, we are just beginning. And that, as a financial opportunity, is massive. So for anybody that got into Bitcoin a decade ago, they're multimillionaires today. It's just, that's what it was. You could buy Bitcoin for pennies, and today it's $30,000. You're set. Most people, didn't get into it until sometime in the last 5 to 7 years, with the last two run-ups. What I love the best about Bitcoin is up to this point, it's been a cycle that is almost, you can count it to the day. And there's no investment that is that cyclical in such a consistent manner. And so really you can't afford to, you can't afford not to get into it. And it's more expensive. But the other thing that whole industry brought to us was the whole concept of fractional investing. Before that, if you were going to buy stock, you had to have enough money to buy a whole unit of stock. You do not need to buy a whole unit of Bitcoin. You buy it based on how much money you have, and you'll get a fraction of it. That's become, and that has been carried back into the stock market mentality through platforms like Robinhood and some others now. But until the last few years, that wasn't an option. And so it kept people that felt they had not enough money to invest, it kept them out of the investing world. Today, you can invest with as little as $5. I have clients that put $5 away every month into Bitcoin. And they've been doing it now for a few years. And it piles up. And they're now seeing thousands of dollars coming back to them as this asset starts to grow. And once we go into our next up cycle, they're going to have money that's going to, rival what they're earning in their businesses. And all they did was $5 a week or $5 a month. So it's accessible to everyone. And so there's really no good excuse not to do it.
So
That's what I love.
I agree with you on everything. I'll just have to do the normal disclaimers. This show is not investment advice. It's not legal advice. It's
Right.
not,
Right.
anything like that. You have to make your own decisions. But I definitely, personal opinion, I agree with what you just said. You do
Right.
have to get started somewhere. I tied into what you were talking about, though. I do think, wearing the educator hat now, I think it is important for everyone to access use Susan's information, but also there's other platforms too. And so I'm just going to kind of quickly mention, I created the Blockchain Legal Institute as a centralized resource for the decentralized. So you had already said that, there were all these, used all these terms, you've used artificial intelligence, you've used Bitcoin, you've used Ethereum and blockchain. And so it's really important for us to have access to diverse platforms that can help educate as we are navigating this space. And that's why I created that. So that way, as the laws are changing, let's say that Congress says, okay, you can't invest into a certain token. And Bitcoin is not, I don't call that a token. Again, everyone is going to be impacted by the laws. And so on the Blockchain Legal Institute's platform, there's the laws from around the world. There's the laws in every state. And there's access to associations, and there's a news feed, and there's events. So that way you can educate and learn. So again, I invite people to join the Blockchain Legal Institute, especially if you're building a business and you want to know how can you navigate Web3 and the blockchain and, take your business to the next level. There are experts that are on the platform that can help guide. And the other very simple resource that I'm going to stop sharing my screen here that I've written about is the Bitcoin Cinderella. It's a very fun fairy tale that the Bitcoin Cinderella and the Seven Dwarves is about Bitcoin. The Bitcoin Cinderella itself is a series that will help you understand the vocabulary, because every area has its own unique vocabulary. And so to not be afraid of where you're stepping into a new area, you have to learn the terminology. And once you understand the terms and it's not scary, then you have more of the foundation that you need to make decisions. So that's the reason why the fairy tales were written, to kind of be an easy discussion between parents and kids. Because again, this type of decentralized financial world, they're going to need to know about, in addition to the traditional financial world. So that way they can decide how to blend their own finances and making their independent decisions for their own personal freedom, just like you talked about, so any last minute thoughts? Because we covered a lot, and it's always been fun chatting with you. I know we're going to have many more conversations. Any last minute thoughts for our listeners?
Just one idea. women tend to find anything financial related is intimidating. And I've found when I work with them that when they realize that it's really just about stories, it's about storytelling. It's not about the number crunching. It's about the stories about what's going on in the world. And if you come to it with curiosity in what is going on, you'll find that it's fascinating. I have in my group class, I had one of the steps is to go out and find something really interesting to bring back to the group. And my clients come back with, this was the most fascinating weekend I've had. I didn't know what was going on in the world. There are so many cool things going on. And that's what it's really about. It gives you a reason to go and find out what's going outside of the own experience that you're living in. And you see how exciting. And in this time when people are fearful and they're feeling uncertain and they're worried about what's happening, when you see all the exciting things going on in the world, it makes you feel better. It's not all bad news. There's really exciting and positive things happening out there in the world. And so take the position of going and learning stories. If you go and learn the stories, it's not scary anymore. And it actually becomes a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I might mention also for those that are listening to Crypto Mom 2, the talk show, go into some of my historic feeds because I have interviewed individuals who have been working within the blockchain space for years, and their stories are just amazing because it gives you a different view about the business side and the solutions that they are creating for problems, that we take for granted, whether it's in the healthcare area, the voting area. I mean, blockchain and the financial world, it's amazing. So, Susan, thank you so much for being on. Everyone, as I always say at the end of all my shows, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. We are so interconnected. We're all part of one world. And have a great day. And I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Great.